And then when you look at Lagos State, you recognize that Lagos has been under the leadership of essentially one administration, going by different names, whether it's APC, AC, AD, what have you, essentially one administration for almost 25 years, which is in effect a generation. And if you think about the resources that Lagos State has at its disposal, and then you look at the ground that we've covered in those 25 years in relation to what could have been accomplished, we think that Lagos is certainly a laggard rather than a leader, even though the current leadership of Lagos would have you believe that Lagos is doing better than many other states, but we believe that's a false comparison. We believe that the hands are not created equal, they're not given equal resources, and we shouldn't expect equal outcomes. And we believe that there's a fundamental reason why we're failing to make progress. In addition to that, there are many, but that at the root of it is a problem which affects all the other sort of policy areas and sectors. The root of that issue is the fact that we do not have a government of the people, by the people, for the people in Lagos. We have a government of the people, by some people, for themselves. In effect, we have leadership that is not acting solely and faithfully in the public interest. Decisions are made for reasons other than the public interests, vested interests of those close to those in office. And to the extent that you have that, just as would be the case if you're in a private organization undergoing the same thing as it would be the case in any nation or any state, you're going to have basically stalled leadership, you're going to have stalled development, and that essentially is what we've seen in Lagos. And we believe the time to change that is now. We believe 2023 is the opportunity, a greater opportunity than has ever been the case. We believe that the psyche of the people are attuned to change. We believe that more people are focused on the electoral process this time than ever before. And even though apathy has been a problem historically and may still be a problem in the upcoming election, we believe we're likely to see a much improved outcome in 2023. And we're coming from a low base. So, we've had a situation where essentially 1 out of 5 registered voters have voted, actually 1 out of 6, and 5 out of 6 registered voters have not voted. To change the narrative completely, we don't need all of those 5 to come out and vote. If 1 out of the remaining 5 comes out to vote, you double the number of voters out there. So again, we're coming off of a low base. I think it's important to also mention that we may and are likely also to see a different dynamic in 2023. One of the things that happens with the passage of the Electoral Act is the potential for electronic transmission of votes. And to the extent that the fear that some of the people have had in the past is that, in the collation process of electioneering, that a lot happens in terms of the collation of those votes. Things are changed, papers are doctored, and so on and so forth. And with electronic transmission, to the extent that this is implemented by INEC, the role that technology plays in terms of increasing transparency, in terms of removing the potential for funny business, I think will be greatly improved in 2023. So when you combine all of these things, we think that there is a great opportunity for change. And the essence of what we're doing is to come out there and give people an option and make them see and convince them that there is, in fact, a credible third option to APC and PDP, which people, believe you me, are fed up of. So this is just by way of background. I'm sure that, we can get into more details, policy areas, et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to give you a context for my candidacy and the essence and the ethos of what we're trying to accomplish. Thank you. So I don't go on and talk too much and to the end of the session, let me just hand it over here so that we can get interactive, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Funso, for your opening gambit. That was very well delivered. Thank you so much. Yes, that was very rounded. So for this roundtable, we have 6 panelists to discuss education, wealth creation, public infrastructure, civic engagement, security, the civil service, information communications technology, taxation policy, local government autonomy, development and control. So it's broad, and we want to try to touch the important areas. Yeah, we want to try to touch all these areas in a short time that we have, so that our conversation is substantive and productive. So our panelists are Jerome Mafeni, Dr. Jerome Mafeni, Matthew Koka, Yetunde Makinde, Peter Oyoshora, Dagogo Karebi White, and Kayode Awokoya. So members of the audience are also welcome to send the questions, send questions, state their questions in the chat box, and those questions will be harvested, and we can speak from chat box.
That's the first thing they say.
Yeah, can you guys mute your phones? You're not.
Can we mute our mics when we're not talking?
Yeah, please. Yeah. So we're going to have questions from the chat box. Yeah, sending, so Funso can have an opportunity to answer those questions. At this time, I will start with Dr. Jerome Mafeni to go ahead with his first question. Jerome?
Okay, thanks, Mohamed. Thanks, Funso, for agreeing to share some of your thoughts with us as you embark on this journey to get the opportunity to rule Lagos State. I think the first question I'd like to ask has to do with what are the strategies for mobilizing the greater Lagos community to basically turn around from supporting the APC that has traditionally ruled Lagos, and now has an opportunity with Asiwaju Bola Tinubu being elected to be the flag bearer for the APC nationally, and so therefore the bulk of the population is Yoruba from the southwest will likely to be lining behind Asiwaju, because this is the turn for the southwest to rule Nigeria. How would the ABC mobilize communities to change that narrative, to recognize that this is the time for change and that APC should not be the party to support going forward, particularly in this election? So that's the first question in terms of how communities will be mobilized. The second one, of course, is the one that I'm sure you should be expecting, and that is that our political process has always been very violent. And now with the added variables of Fulani herdsmen and kidnapping and attacking communities and all that, how are you going to give the voters the reassurance that this time around, when the elections come to pass, that those who will be aligning openly in support of the ADC and your campaign will not be harassed or their lives threatened by the opposition, who traditionally have always used the agberos and the touts and the road transport workers and the unemployed in society to terrorize their opponents. Thank you, Funso. It would be nice to hear your perspectives on those two questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I go?
Go ahead, Funso.
Okay, great. Thank you, and thank you for those questions. So strategies for mobilizing for a turnaround from APC. I think that the first starting point is to say that the dominance, like I said, of the APC is, I think, overblown, because if you look at the current APC governor, Jide Sanwo-Olu was elected with 700,000 votes. And the total votes cast was about 1 million votes. And so in the last election, you had about 5 million people who could have voted who did not vote. In fact, those people chose not to vote for APC for whatever reason. So we think that that is a key group that our message must be targeted at. We know that within the existing voter base for APC, there are some hardcore bases there that will be very difficult to dislodge from APC. And whilst we may put in some effort, we will be very measured in terms of not essentially spinning our wheels or banging our heads against walls that are unlikely to yield in our favor. We think that amongst the apathetic are many who have not felt they were presented with options that they felt were compelling. And part of our message is to use the period between now and the general election, which is a period of about 9 or 10 months, to hammer home that message, to reach out to the different communities, whether they be physical communities or virtual communities such as the ones we're speaking with, or you all that we're speaking with here today, to carry that message that there is indeed a viable option to the APC. I should also say that if you take the pulse of Lagosians, you will find that there is actually, people are fed up. People are fed up. People recognize that they're not well served by the current government. Rich people are fed up. Poor people are fed up. Middle income people are fed up. Old people are fed up. Young people are fed up. Middle-aged people are fed up. So we think that the challenge is going to be to carry that message and to let people believe that their own vote makes a difference and will make a difference in 2023. And the reception to the message that we've carried so far has been positive, and we just need to continue to drive that message. And for those of you who are on this call, who hear this message and are persuaded by the message, it will be important for you also, over time to become advocates of that message. Because at the end of the day, we will succeed if enough people believe and are of the view that we can succeed. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that no amount of APC, money politics or what have you can overturn. And we will do all the traditional things that we expect to do in politics, mobilizing in the communities, using the structure that the party has within those communities, even though may not be as extensive and as well funded as an APC structure, given that we're not using the resources of the state. But we'll do all of those traditional things in addition to running what we think will be an innovative and effective campaign that uses non-traditional means as well. The second question has to do with the political process and violence. we have been a little bit more, I would say, fortunate in Lagos. Yes, we have had sporadic areas where violence has been a feature, but generally, more widely, elections have generally been peaceful in Lagos. Again, part of that being the fact that Lagos is a cosmopolitan city, limited area, so more easily policed, urban, etc. There are problematic areas, and those generally have been areas where, historically, it is said that the ruling party has felt that their leadership is more threatened, or their dominance is more threatened. I think part of it is the advocacy that needs to happen well ahead of the elections this time, to ensure that the awareness and the sensitivity is out there, that it is well known that those are target communities, and that the electorate will not accept a situation where those votes are interfered with. And part of this also is going to be, if we are successful in what we're setting out to do, the people themselves will be part of the structure, and the people themselves will take on a part of the responsibility of policing their own votes and their own ability to vote. This has got to be a movement that is carried on the backs of the people. And if we succeed in doing that, we will succeed. And if we don't succeed in doing that, we're likely to struggle.
Thank you very much, Funso, for your brilliant response. Yeah, that was very insightful. Thank you very much. Yeah. So this time, I don't know if Matthew Coker is on the call. Matthew?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good, fantastic. So you're next, and I would like you to ask your 2 questions to give Funso an opportunity to respond to them in the context of his vision for Lagos State. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kimo. Good evening, Funso. It's a privilege to engage you and talk directly to you.
Thank you.
In your various messages you've put out, you've kind of articulated a lot of the things that we are worried about as individual citizens as well as residents of Lagos. We see those things that you have highlighted. And one of the things you said, which I found particularly striking, was your dream of a forward-facing Lagos, free from the grips of self-serving interests and basically structured to serve the people rather than their own self-interests. We do know that Lagos is a highly populated area as well as highly urbanized. And the most significant challenges that people face have to do with quality of life. And we also do know that the primary interface that people have with government is at the local level. The fact is, in Lagos State today, the local government practically does not exist. And that's because their role has been usurped by the state government, and their responsibilities are clearly not being carried out because the interest lies elsewhere. So my first question would be, assuming as we all pray and hope for and dream that you come into power, how would you enhance the service delivery of local governments to the citizens of the state with an aim to improve the quality of life, which is the biggest challenge that people face in Lagos today? Then The second question, which has to do with also quality of life, has to do with the state of our neighborhoods. Classic civil planning or town planning basically is aimed at ensuring that there are enough facilities for people in their various neighborhoods. And neighborhoods are classified according to various purposes. But now we find that there seems to be a complete breakdown in the demarcation between commercial, residential, and industrial neighborhoods. So you find the little infrastructure that is on ground being overburdened, and you find the deeper pockets of commercial entities driving residents out of neighborhoods. Case in point, Lekki Phase 1 today is largely a huge market. Central Lagos, that was basically supposed to be the CBD, is another big market. We have industries in residential area. We go to the outskirts or the downtown areas of Lagos, and we find that change of use is largely not controlled. How would this be addressed under your government? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew, for those questions. The first one has to do with quality of life and then local government, empowerment of local governments, and ensuring that those services that emanate at the local government level are in fact delivered to the people. I think that, the problem as is often the case in Nigeria, is not that we do not have the structure, the appropriate sort of structure on paper, for governance. So at the end of the day, local government is close to the people. There are provisions for the funding of local governments to enable them to perform those functions. But generally, you will find that at the state level, a lot of those things are usurped, by the state governments. Also, it's the case that the state government elections, the local government elections, are organized by the State Independent Electoral Commission, not the National Electoral Commission. In other words, those elections are handled in effect by the state government. So often, those who are in those offices are appendages of the state actors, or the actors at the state level, right? In effect, the governor and the shall we call the powers behind the governor, or the powers that be in the case of Lagos. So, so that's the one thing. Second, also, is the fact that this rush to control resources, again, has something to do with the fidelity and faithfulness in the management of those resources, right? If indeed the outcome that you want is for the resources to be used in the interest of the people, then you're less concerned about where that deployment happens, whether it happens at the state level, or whether it happens at the local government level. You see what I mean? So you would not be overly concerned about
what is this?
As long as the right decisions are being made. You see what I mean? So, I think these things are all intertwined in the sense that if the ultimate goal is to ensure that the quality of lives of people is improved, and there's a recognition of what needs to happen at the local government level, and there is not a desire to divert public resources for personal benefit, then the right decisions, it's not a different decision from a decentralization decision in a corporate setting. Do you see what I mean? Because you want the resources to be deployed at the level where they are best deployed for the benefits that you're seeking, the outcomes that you're seeking. So a lot of what we see is about intention. And when you see things that are done in a way that sort of don't make sense to the average sort of right-thinking person, is because what people are solving for is different. right? They're not solving for ultimately the public interest. So we will have no problem empowering the local governments but at the same time, you have to ensure that the capacities are there within the local government, right, to make those decisions. So in other words, and then you have to ensure that you insist on probity and integrity in the deployment of those resources. And this is something that relates to the broader question around ensuring that there's accountability, transparency, and integrity in the conduct of government business by government officials. It's not just a local government issue, it's a state issue as well. Our government will insist on accountability, will insist on transparency. To the extent possible, we'll pay people well, and we'll do our best to pay people well. But once we do that, and as we do that, we will insist that people must act in the public interest. They must declare conflicts of interest. They must avoid conflicts of interest. They must not line their own pockets or the pockets of those with whom they're associated at the expense of the public interest. And once we do that, we're happy to deploy and devolve the resources to the places where they're best managed. So that's that. On the question of the state of neighborhoods, well, I mean, you know, it's part of the general chaos, I think, that characterizes Lagos. Lagos is a mega city. I mean, we attract people. People are moving to Lagos every day. The population of Lagos, as we understand it, is between 20 and 30 million people. And, you know, as I say, you know, when you have such pressure, right, on a state, an area, then it is all the more important that you plan and you ensure that you are orderly in what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to have chaos. It's also important that the government agencies that are entrusted with that public trust that says, you know, these are the regulations that must be followed. This is where this type of thing must be built. That is where that type of thing must be built. That those entities and those individuals that occupy those offices, in fact, perform the functions of those offices. And, you know, where there are rules, to ensure that those rules are followed and are effectively policed, not just such that when people contravene, they can get a payday through the back door, but insist that the right thing be done. You see what I mean? A lot of the time when government agencies come after people, it's not because they're trying to stop people from doing the wrong thing. It's really just about, you know, how can we, you know, extort something from them, having seen that they've done the wrong thing. And so what happens is that, you know, it becomes this hide and seek game and this boju kind of game where, forgive the vernacular, this kind of game where, you know, so again, I think that, and it's not the case. If you go and look at the books, if you go and look in the planning departments, it's not that these rules don't exist. It's not that the plans are not there. It's not that as if we don't have those things on paper, you know, but it's about the implementation. It's about insisting on the right thing. And a lot of the time, as I say also, people cannot insist on the right thing from their subordinates because they also themselves do not do the right thing. So if you're in a glass house, you can't throw stones, right? So all of this is, you know, a lot of the time the rod comes from the top all the way down. And once you fix it, you also fix it all the way.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you very much, Funso, for your response to those questions. I'd say this time is very exciting. I did say that this represents a new moment of hope. You know, I like what I hear. I like the questions. I like the answers. And on that note, I would like to call on Ms. Yetunde Makinde Ms. Makinde is an author, and she's very passionate about Nigeria. She wants Nigeria to do well. So, Ms. Yetunde.
Yes, Dr. Mamadou.
Thank you. So we are at your destination. So
Okay.
will you be kind enough to ask Funso 2 questions?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Mamadou. Good evening, everyone. It's evening in my part of the world. I'm resident in Lagos. Before I ask my question, I did like to commend and salute the courage of Mr. Doherty, because we all know that it takes a lot of bravery and boldness to wade into Nigeria's political space. So my first question for him is on the civil service. The Nigerian civil service at federal and state level are highly corruptible, lacking in professionalism, accountability, and neutrality. I wonder if you have a plan in place to sort out this challenge. I ask this because without an efficient, professional, and service-oriented civil service, the execution of your projects and programs will be hard to achieve. And this question ties in with the #1 area of focus as listed on the Funso Doherty website. My second question is on population of Lagos State. Lagos is generally thought to be a mega city. I personally think the state only qualifies as a mega city on account of its burgeoning population of 14 to 20 million, depending on the statistics you're looking at. Knowing the critical role of human capital in relation to productivity, what particular policy or program will you enact to maximize the diverse talents the Lagos population offers? These are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Funso.
Okay, thank you, Yetunde, for those questions. So first, I like your question about the civil service because it's very central to what we're setting out to do. So when I talk about, at the foundation of what we're doing, we sort of describe it like almost like a house. And you have the foundation and then you have pillars. And the foundation really is the reform of the government sector. And the government sector includes the civil service. So, it's both political office holders, public office holders, as well as the civil service. And a lot of the time, the disorder that we see in the society itself starts from the disorder that we have within government and within the civil service. And one of the things that we've said is that we're going to bring accountability, transparency into the civil service. And that will include things like meritocracy. And it will also include things like compensation reform as well. Part of the problem that you also have in the civil service, or that you have in the civil service, is that people are not well paid, right? It's the case that yes, we have many workers there who are perhaps less than, basically not adding value, and we have to deal with that problem. But at the same time, you have to pay people a reasonable wage. You can't give people, all of this power. They have control over, to do and undo in the public service, but they're not earning a reasonable wage. So we believe that is one aspect of the reform that we must do. But also it's then important to insist that people do the right thing, act with integrity, and if they do not, to take action, ensure there are consequences, including prosecution, right? And you have to just do it. I mean, there's nothing I think that is sacrosanct or intractable about doing this in public service. Yes, it's difficult, but it can be done, especially if that commitment comes from the top all the way down. Of course, it's very difficult to do if the guy at the top is, the biggest culprit, right? And it's never going to happen. But if you have that, as it's almost like in any organization, the tone you set, reinforced by the incentives, rewards, and punishments that you put in place, over time will drive behaviors. And we think that the civil service is an organization like any other organization. Yes, there may be a political process. There may be a political process to instituting these changes, right? So there's a way it needs to be done to ensure that that you get your way, and that you're not that you are not basically that you have a plan for implementing this in such a way that it is not it doesn't blow itself up within a short space of you're trying to do it. It's almost like a change management process which you have to have. But once you have determined that this is what you want to do and you insist that you're going to do it, the truth of the matter is that, like in any organization, it can be done. And we will insist on doing it. Now, having done that, you will then begin to see, I think, the benefits of that, because in every policy area then, you are able to see that the resources that are associated with that area, the resources that are allocated to that area, are used appropriately in an accountable way, based on the plans that you have for that area, and whether that is health, whether that is education, whether that is infrastructure. That foundation that you've laid, which is a foundation of ensuring that you have people in there who are reasonably paid, they feel good about themselves, they are doing good work, they are held accountable. If they steal money, they are prosecuted. If they engage in conflicts of interest, they are called out. Once you have that in place, then you start to see the benefits across all functional areas and all policy areas. I know that in a way, people are quite skeptical about this. People feel that the civil service has been the way it is for a long time. And it's maybe we are naive about it. I can assure you that we're not. Yes, there may be challenges to it. They say if you fight corruption, corruption will fight back. Yes, but we go in fully aware that but just resolved and committed and convicted that we have a responsibility to the larger community and the larger public to insist that the agencies of government that are responsible for determining their outcomes and their quality of life in a range of areas are indeed and in fact serving their interests and not serving private pockets. With respect to population, how are we going to ensure that the talents are are developed, that we develop human capital in such a way as to meet the needs of the modern society? I think a lot of it stems initially from education. I think that one of the things that we're determined to do is to review even the curriculums in our schools, right? To ensure that what people are being taught is not archaic, it is a curriculum that is relevant to the modern day and the modern day society in which we live. There's an element of that has also to do with having a breadth of education and skills training that produces, again, a breadth of capacity within the population, so that we're not producing everybody, we're not sort of training everybody through schools who will then go on the street and be looking for the same office jobs, which there's just a limited number of them. So ensuring that people are being trained across a range of traditional, vocational, technical areas that allows us to develop human capacity to meet the needs of the modern society. There are many aspects. For example, if in Lagos today, for example, many people will tell you, maybe those in the construction industry or those in the, they'll tell you that, they have difficulty finding a sufficient number of good masons, for example, or, or good plumbers who are well-trained, or good electricians who are well-trained. These are pockets where you have a disparity between supply and demand. On the other hand, there's no shortage of people who are out there looking for job with, with school certificate results or OND, looking for an office job, right? This is just one example, but also technical training, technological training, all of these kinds of things, I think, are things that help to sculpt and to mold our human capital in a way that suits and fits the shape and structure of our modern society. And jobs, I know, will continue to be a problem. It will take a lot of effort to address it in a city of the size of Lagos that receives the influx of people that Lagos does. But again, this is an area where the different policy areas will work together. It's related, for example, and I'll just digress a little bit to this, to this area because it's related to your question. It's related, by the way, also to the policies around small and medium-scale businesses and ease of doing business, right? Why is that? Because these are the businesses, small businesses, which employ 3, 4, 5 people, right? They employ in aggregate a very large number of people across the city. And it's true, by the way, that is true of almost any modern capital, commercial city like Lagos, right? And government cannot employ all of these people. So we need to support these businesses to succeed. We need to support them to help them get on their feet. Because when they do that, they are able to employ more people, absorb more people, all right? And in a way that also helps us to start addressing the jobs challenge, in addition to doing the other things which, create jobs. Yes, we want to attract the big companies, but we also want to support the small businesses to employ folks. Yeah, so these are some of the, I guess, points I would make in response to your question. I hope that addresses it.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Funso, for your brilliant response to Yetunde's questions. And I will say that Yetunde is an author. Yetunde, by the way, I like chapter 4 of your book.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I didn't get that.
I like chapter 4 of your book.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I did like everyone to get a copy though. It's available on Amazon.
Yeah, Yetunde's book is Who Will Save Nigeria? And I would like all of us to go to Amazon to search for that book, Who Will Save Nigeria? Very well written. Yetunde, thanks for your book. And thanks for your time tonight or this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I see that Echon Ogbemi has had his hand raised for forever. So before I go to the next panelist, I'll ask Echon to ask his question. Echon, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Nice.
I don't know, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. Caveat, for sure, is my brother-in-law, but that doesn't preclude my asking him the tough questions.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Well, I've already paid the dowry, so there's nothing we can do. It's a done deal.
Like that.
Okay. First, congratulations.
We can reverse the contract. Gogo can tell me how to get that done.
But you see, Gogo is also very close to me, so he may give you duplicitous information, but Gogo is also my cousin by proxy through Anire, as you well know. Okay, so for sure, congratulations on winning the primary for your party. I mean, I'm privy to a lot of the hard work which has gone through to get you to this stage, and I congratulate you. I believe the most important issue for you, for sure, is actually to win the election. So that's the general election, the gubernatorial race. INEC has sent out a tweet recently that they're having unprecedented requests for voter registration. This tweet, I think I saw it today, and they're deploying additional resources to meet this demand. This suggests to me that the message of registering to vote is getting out to the electorate, and we'll probably have unprecedented numbers of people registered to vote. Impressively, there are almost 100 people on this call. And I would like to ask you, if you're able to do so without compromising your campaign strategy, how do you plan to take advantage of this unprecedented voter registration process? And how will you reach, we have a good number of people here, but then the electorate who will be responsible for electing you and bringing you to victory next year are not on this call. Many do not have access. They have access, or maybe do not use Twitter. Many people do use WhatsApp. But how will you reach and motivate those millions of people who either are not registered to vote yet, who are registered or haven't voted in the past, or those who do not have access to or use social media, but who you need to engage to win this election? How will Funso Doherty become a name that is known to this electorate of Lagos State?
Okay, thank you, Etam. So I think that nothing in what we say should convey the impression that the traditional means of reaching voters on the ground, we will not deploy. We will deploy those means as well. So we'll be out there in the communities, talking to people, the geographic communities, canvassing votes, etc. Bear in mind, our party it's not a new party. That the ADC has been around since mid-2000s. So there is a structure on ground in the local governments, and we will deploy also, in addition to the traditional means. I don't want to get too deep into our campaign strategy.
I realized he was my goal.
But that's to say that, and I mean, we will. I talked about our communities-based strategy, and so we will. So the geographic communities are one aspect of it, which is kind of the traditional way, and we will do that. We will also pursue strategies across different communities, and like I said, this is one of many communities. And by the way, if there are 90 people on this call, this is one community to which these 90 people belong, right? Now, each of us on this call probably has a number of other communities to which we belong, right? So you can almost think about it in a network context. If you were to the number of communities that people, in one way or the other, just from this call, we have some advocates on this call. It gives you a sense of viral possibility and opportunity. And this is something that we're pursuing systematically. I don't want to go into too much detail about how we're doing that, but that's the general concept. I think at the end of the day, our message always is that, and we will do the non-traditional things that people do, such as the media, what they call the air wars. So we'll be in the media space as well at the appropriate time. Not in open campaign season now, because there are dates associated with that, but we will be in the public space, we will be in the media and all of those things, which again drive, sort of the media awareness in addition to the social media stuff that we talk about. But importantly, we also tell people that, if our message resonates, we expect that people would, if they're excited by that message, also be advocates of that message, and in effect become nodes in that viral process. I think it's important to say that an important part of what we're going to need, obviously, as all campaigns do, is the support of funders, right? So people who, buy into what we're doing and who want to support us in the same way that campaigns are supported by, their funders and supporters in developed societies. That's the model upon which we're not a campaign that is built on, a godfather or a big money bag somewhere, who is essentially making a commercial decision or a commercial investment, which will be recouped when they get into office. We're running what we expect to be a people's campaign, which the people will carry on will identify with and support. And if they do so, will consider what we are doing a part of, will consider themselves a part of what we are doing. And so give us the resources that we need to pursue and expand and boost this awareness thing that we talk about. And it's a bit exponential in the way it works, as you probably know. So I think that once we can continue to sustain the momentum of that message, now that we're post-primaries, I think we can kick into again a newer and a higher phase for the next couple of months. And then when we get into the formal campaign season, that also then kicks into another phase. But as in the same way that we're having this conversation, the structures of the party and the local governments are also having their own sort of strategizing, and ultimately, both of those things will have to come together and work and be effective. So it's not. I would say we're not reinventing the wheel, but we're doing things differently, and we're carrying a different message. And we think, based on the reception that we've received so far, that message has legs.
Nice. Thank you very much, Funso, for your remarks, for your answers. Very insightful, I'll say again. Yeah. So at this time, I would like Peter, Yoshua, get in the mix. Peter, are you on the call?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can I go?
Absolutely. Funso, yeah, you and Peter.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Doherty. A Nigeria Tribune. Sure, thank you. Nigeria Tribune analysis of VAT revenue generation and allocation between January and August of 2021 revealed that although Lagos State generated about 429 billion naira, the state only got 239 billion. That is about 32% of the revenue generated back from the federal government. As you are aware, Rivers State is in court, in fact, in the Supreme Court. Are you going, if elected as governor, are you going to join Rivers State in the brief? And if the suit is unsuccessful, will you make sure that Lagos State get her fair share of the VAT she generates? That's question number one. Question number two, in your online information titled My Vision for Lagos, you have Expand Tech Lagos Initiative as a line item. My question is, could you be more specific what exactly you're going to do to expand Tech Lagos Initiative?
Okay, thank you. I think Lagos State will always be supportive of efforts to ensure that we get our fair share of the resources that we generate. And so, you know, I personally would be supportive of those efforts. And I think that they are part of a broader set of sort of a broader philosophy of saying that, you know, we need to essentially, you know, devolve some of these resources to the states where those resources are being generated. And, you know, that goes under very different names, you know, some call it restructuring, some call it whatever you call it. But that general thought that, you know, the resources, you should limit to what is essential, the things that go to the center, and you should allow, as far as possible, resources to remain within the regions so that they can do the things that are needed to be done, which are close to the people, to improve the quality of lives of the people. So philosophically, that's where we stand, and we'll be supportive of those measures. Now, with respect to the Expand Tech Lagos initiative, so essentially what we're saying there is that, you know, Lagos, you know, in many ways, there's a tech community that is sort of building in Lagos. You know, we have the fintech space. We have what they call, you know, Yaba Con, which I don't know if you're sort of familiar with, which is the area in Yaba, which is you know, in the vicinity of the university and the schools. And the idea is to essentially ensure that, you know, government does what it can to support the ability of those communities and those clusters to foster innovation. So whatever government can do to provide infrastructure or to provide the contractual comfort to enable private sector invest in infrastructure to support that activity will be a priority for our government. We will also look at what we can do to also, in fact, create additional clusters, right? So we have, for example, in Lagos, as you know, areas where what are called free trade areas, free trade zones, free zones, you know, and the idea is, you know, is really sort of around this localization of location and localization of industry clusters in such a way to benefit from you know, proximity to ports or what have you. And I think in the same way, we can cluster, and this has been shown to be supportive of innovation across the world. We can cluster tech communities and provide government support for the infrastructural framework that will be needed to enable people plug in and play and all of that. So, I mean, whatever government can do to support that, government will be keen to do. I think it's important to, and then things like broadband, by the way, and the provision of connectivity in a city like Lagos is not optional, really. It's more of a necessity, and it's something that government should also support. This is one area where there's actually an initiative which is going on by within Lagos State, but it's been done by I guess the contract is awarded to a special purpose vehicle, and like many of the things, in Lagos, it's not clear. There's no transparency around it, and all of that. And these are sole concessions. So these are things that we need to shine a light on and understand whether, in fact, the interests of the public are fully protected, and whether these are things that are untainted, in terms of how they are conceived, how they are awarded, and how they are implemented.
Yeah, thank you very much, Funso, for your response to Peter. At this time, I would like to go to Dagogo Karibi White. I'm sure he has some very interesting and substantive questions. Gugu, are you on the call?
Yeah, I am. Thanks.
Thank you, Gugu. Yeah, over to you.
All right. All right, then. First of all, let me congratulate you, Funso, on this very great achievement. I say great because it takes a lot of boldness. A lot of boldness, I say, not because you lack the capacity, because you're full of capacity and you have exhibited it and shown it in a lot of things you've done. So my question is like this. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about human rights. Lagos is such an interesting place. Reading through some of your comments, and I'm going to quote you, your last interview in the Vanguard, you said, "I am stepping forward today because all around us, we see evidence of this misalignment between the actions of the leadership and the interest of the people. Officers of government agencies that should be instruments of service to the people often act like predators, preying on the very people they exist to serve. Importantly, they should be paid decent wages, without which the moral authority to insist on integrity is undermined, and without which there can be no lasting, what's the word now? Okay, I can't see that. Anyway, fundamental to good governance, and because that's what you've been preaching, is human rights. Because if you don't have human rights, it will be difficult for the people to feel the government, as it were. In the last 20 years, we have observed all forms of human rights abuses in Lagos State, from the right to life. Even recently, somebody was killed on the streets of Lekki, up until now. We don't even know what the government is doing about that. The right to get work and be paid a decent wage, those are fundamentals. So how do you intend to look at these things? From the standpoint of policy, from the standpoint of enforcement, it's not enough to make these statements. There has to be policy around how we intend to protect the lives of citizens, and these rights are enshrined in the Constitution, and they are really detailed,
Oh, did we lose Gogo? Okay, you're back.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Oh, empower, what we are talking about.
Okay, you said you were saying that these rights are enshrined in the Constitution.
Yes, these rights are enshrined in the Constitution, and they are detailed. So basically, your work is clearly cut out for you. My second question goes to the issue of infrastructure. Lagos has a population in excess of 20 odd people. But we all know that there are a lot of infrastructure deficit. There's a huge infrastructure gap, you know. So I'm talking about infrastructure in terms of roads, in terms of electricity, in terms of waste disposal, you know, and in terms of public transportation. What kind of plans when you become governor? I say when, because I believe with the kind of people around you, it is possible. When you become governor, do you have to tackle this heavy infrastructure gap? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Two very good questions from my learned colleague, as would be expected. So the first has to do with human rights, and human rights, apart from kind of the letter of the law and what the various rights that are enshrined and established in the Constitution. There's a gentleman by the name of Amartya Sen, who has studied development. And one of the things that he says is one of the leading development scholars. He views development as freedom. And the case he makes is that when societies develop, essentially what happens is that people's freedoms are enhanced. And the less developed a society is, the less freedom people have. And the more developed a society is, you can almost measure it, a barometer of it is either a barometer or a reflection or a measure of it is the freedoms that people have. So developing in a way is freedom. And that relates directly, I think, to your question, because beyond what's on the books and the law and all of that, if people, the quality of life of people and the social services that people have and the services that government provides to the people are woefully inadequate, then it will become, in effect, a human rights issue, right? Because people will suffer indignities, people will suffer harsh realities that they have no business suffering. Whether it's people, maternal deaths, newborn deaths, people who have no business dying, because what they are dying from is, nothing ought not to be the case. To even education and the quality of the education that they get. All of these things, at the end of the day, is a spectrum of things. That at some point in the spectrum, we're talking about quality of life, and another point in the spectrum, we're talking about human rights, right? So a lot of what we see, which manifests as violations of human rights, essentially stem from failures in the provision of basic services by government. And the fact that those basic services are not prioritized in a way by government, such that people then become exposed to things that essentially curtail their human rights as a matter of course. And nobody sort of blinks on it. Of course, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, when we see human rights, there has to be that resolve on the part of government to ensure that those rules, and as well as I do, and you probably know better than me, that it's never a problem that we don't have, it's never the case that we don't have the laws in the books around. Right? The laws exist, right, in almost all cases. What we lack is the wherewithal, the enforcement capacity, the security infrastructure, and in some cases, the will to follow through on some of those things. It's also the case that there appears to be one criminal justice system for people, for the haves, and another criminal justice system for the have-nots. You know, again, that's a function of the justice and the fair-handedness and the equity that government brings to its leadership of the people. Ultimately, many of these things will be helped if we are able to hit some of the development milestones that we believe that Lagos ought to have hit long before now. So that's the human rights question. On the infrastructure, it is true that there are a lot of gaps. It is true that more needs to be done. Infrastructure in a place like Lagos, you know, relates to things like transportation, water, waste, power. You know, you can extend it to broadband and things like that. In each of these areas, there's more that we can do, right? In transportation, for example, you talk about roads and yes, but you know, the rail system has been in development for 10, 15 years, right? Why does that need to be the case? Other rail systems that have started at the same time that we did have completed and moved on to other things, right? Even our water transportation infrastructure, we don't have a full-fledged service which could essentially make the waterways a viable, effective form of transportation for large numbers of people. It's run more or less like a bespoke, you know, operation, really, which it ought not to be. But I would also say that a big part of the infrastructure challenge that we face in Lagos has to do with the management of existing infrastructure. There's a lot of focus on building new infrastructure, building new roads, fixing existing roads, and all of that is important work. But I think a lot less has been done, a lot more needs to be done in terms of improving the way in which our existing infrastructure is being managed and the lawfulness and orderliness with which it's being used. Because if you don't have law and order in the use of some of this infrastructure, the infrastructure will never be enough. You will continue to build and they will continue to be either encroached upon, mismanaged, misused, and you basically won't get the benefit of them. I use the example, if we have a 3-lane road and one lane is encroached or 2 lanes are encroached on by people and that's not policed, and then you have people driving in the wrong direction and all of that. You know, at the end of the day, you know, your infrastructure will never be enough. And government needs to act in a way to restore, you know, an orderly society, reduce chaos, ensure that people act with you know, in an orderly fashion. And again, ensure that those agencies of government who are supposed to be out there enforcing law and order are doing so not in a way to harass people and collect money from them, but doing it in a way and then letting them do what they want to do, having collected that money, but doing it in a way to ensure that they're out there, in effect, you know, policing and ensuring that people do what they're supposed to do, maintain the law and order, so that the vast majority of citizens can go about their business in an unhindered way, without being sort of subject to you know, the disorderly conduct of a few members of society. Part of this is related, and I won't go into it much, but I'll just mention it. Part of this is related to the fact that some of the agents of disorder that we see on the streets in Lagos, you know, are, you know, in a way, government is beholden to some of them, and so they are almost like a law unto themselves. And that is something that needs to be broken, and we can speak more about that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Funso, for your response to those questions. So I have two questions that were harvested from the chat box, and I'll ask them before I move on to the last panelist. So I'll go in sequential order. The first question we have from the chat box is from Dr. Ireti Fajulu, and she asks, well done, Mr. Doherty. Who are the candidates for the House of Assembly for your party? Without a large number of your party in the House, it will be tough working with the House when you win. So, Funso, mic is yours.
Thank you. Yes, you are very correct that it's important to have a down ballot. And so it's important to have candidates at various, within the various sort of buckets of the ballot. Importantly, as you have observed, the state assembly in particular is important because it works closely with the state executive, which is the governor. It's also synergistic actually in the electoral process, because those two elections, the governorship election and the State House of Assembly election, occur on the same day. So there's a synergy associated with the electioneering and the campaigning within those. So we have a roster of candidates for the various. I mean, Lagos has maybe almost 40 House of Assembly members. So we have a roster. It's not the full slate, but we have quite a significant number. And the key is to get into place, some substantial number. It doesn't have to be all. And indeed, it doesn't have to be controlling. Once it's significant, you can probably get done what you need to do. I think a point to also note is that, when the headship changes, right, power structures realign, right? So, what looks like a dominant House of Assembly that toes the line of an APC today, if the governorship changed, people change. People change their alignments. So, so we are approaching it obviously from both perspectives, and we have our eye on that very thing that you outlined, and we have folks who are running those races as we speak.
Thank you very much, Funso Doherty, for your response to Dr. Ireti's questions. So the last question I have from the box is from Aibokan Momadou, and his question is, how can you ensure that all revenues collected gets to government coffers in Lagos State?
Thank you. It's a very good question. A couple of things. First of all, to the extent possible, we will expand and extend the use of technology in the revenue collection infrastructure across government agencies, establishments that are revenue generating. You know that one of the greatest antidotes to lack of transparency, corruption, etc., is once you introduce technology, then there's nowhere to hide. the number of those things. The data becomes, available. So we will do that. And often when you don't see the technology in place or being used, it's not because it's not there or it's difficult to use, it's because people have chosen not to use them, because people don't want transparency. So a lot of the time is the will that you need to address. So we will do that. Secondly, we will challenge this notion of government's revenue being collected by like revenue agencies that are private sector entities, right? And then deriving some sort of commission structures from those, which essentially is just like, it's like outsourcing the work of government and giving up a bunch of our revenue for that purpose. And who owns those entities anyway? When you follow the trail back, it won't be so, you should not be surprised to see where it ends up. So we will challenge that. Government, what else is government there to do if it cannot collect its own revenue? Which government do we know that doesn't have revenue collection agencies? If you have one agency in government, it should be revenue collection agency first. Then you then have all the others, right? Isn't it? So, so to me, I think that's another area of leakage, right? Which needs to be plugged. And then it's just the same way you have those same control processes, governance that we have in well-managed private sector entities or in well-managed government entities across the world. We will institute those things, and we'll just enforce them and insist that people do the right thing, that there's accountability, that there's transparency, and if people steal money, we will prosecute them. And I can just tell you that by the time you do that a few times, people will sit up. People will sit up.
Nice. Thank you very much, Funso. Your last answer to that question. We have a question from Dr. Alexander Obo, and I'll read everything. It says, Funso, congratulations on winning your party's primaries. When you become governor of Lagos State, what are your party policy on population control, reducing maternal mortality, reducing neonatal and under 5 mortality, mental health care for vulnerable persons? This is from Dr. Alexander Obo, a diasporian who lives and works in the United Kingdom. Funso.
Thank you. Maybe I should ask you, Kimo, to take that question as a medical person. Thank you, Alex, for that question. So I think that this health thing is an important thing. If you look at health metrics, and you raise a good question, because if you look at health metrics, in terms of some of these things that you outlined, maternal deaths, newborn deaths, and so on, Nigeria is in a very bad place, right? When you compare those numbers globally, right? In fact, Nigeria skews the global numbers, right? Which is not good. Now, I think, and I have to confirm this, but I think Lagos is better off than many. But just because of our shared numbers, right? The numbers that we're talking about are not small numbers. So even if percentage terms, we are better off than some states. In actual absolute numbers, because our population is so huge, this is not good. And so one of the things that we've said about our healthcare policy is that, we think the barbell is important. And by barbell, I'll explain what I mean. On the one side, you have primary care, which is where you have things like, prenatal, antenatal, maternal care, child, newborn, and all of those kinds of things. where prevention, is better than cure, and so focus on those primary healthcare and deploying resources into primary healthcare. And resources deployed into primary healthcare, a lot of the time, is not about equipment, it's not about new fancy, centers and all of that stuff. It's really about ensuring that you have systems, processes that work, you have records, you have data, and you have welcoming facilities that people feel comfortable going into to access those primary healthcare services. Not facilities that they run away from to go and meet unqualified people outside for questionable care because of the quality of what they get in the government. And the quality just means, how do people feel when they come into a government hospital, in addition to the substantive quality of care that they get. And this is about supervision, it's about management, it's about ensuring that there's accountability and that there is a meritocracy in place. So that's the one side of the barbell. The other side of the barbell is where we also drop the ball is in critical care, right? So in like emergency care, those kinds of things, we also drop the ball there. In the middle, which is where, chronic illnesses, managing, high blood pressure, those kinds of things, we do a reasonable good job there because, you have time and we have, doctors who generally know what they're doing and all of that. But, in terms of the facilities for emergency care, critical care, EMS services, those kinds of things. In a state like Lagos, which is not a very big state, by the way, we should have those centers, in strategic points within Lagos, and we'll cover the entire metropolis. So those are the two areas kind of focus. And I think with this, if you focus on primary care, a lot of those matters will resolve themselves because, things like maternal deaths and newborn deaths, etc., often is a function of absent primary care. Screening, early detection, screening, those kinds of things. It's just the absence of those things that creates unavoidable deaths, which goes back to the quality of life issue and almost the human rights issue at the end of the day, because these children, can't speak for themselves. So, government needs to protect, their interests. So I think that's what I would say with respect to that. Mental health, things like that is also screening. It's part of primary healthcare. Ensuring also that, we have a referral system, that works. Also, even the whole messaging around mental health and the stigmatization of mental health and those kinds of things, and even the kinds of facilities that we have and the way, the modernization of the provision of mental health care, I think are things that we need to focus on. If you look at a lot of these things that I'm talking about in the area of healthcare, they are not things around building massive new facilities. We need to do a bit of that, but private sector is also doing it. So that's not so much where government's effort needs to be. Government's effort needs more to be, and this is where the ball is being dropped, in those facilities, not in awarding contracts, and in which are usually inflated contracts anyway, to build new centers and all of that. No, we may do some of that, but where the gap really is in the systems and the processes and the people and the interaction of those things within the facilities that exist, and ensuring that there's a quality mentality, there's transparency, there's accountability, there's monitoring, there's reporting, and there are measures and metrics. Right? So, getting the care that they need, the quality is such that people will keep coming back, because then they will seek healthcare proactively, the cost will be reduced, mortality will be reduced.
Nice. Thank you very much, Funso, for your comments and your answer to that question. So there's a question. I mean, I know we have gone past a number of questions that were supposed to have asked from the chat box, but there's a question I just like, and I can't move beyond the question, and it's from Muyiwa Ayodeji. And this question is, I'm already sold on the policies and principles. So he likes you. He likes what you're about, which is good. The most important now is how to break into the strongholds of the incumbent. Alimosho, Ajerumi. Now, forgive my pronunciations. Kosufe.
Oh, Kimo, you are calling different things. Oh. Kimo, you are calling different things.
I said, forgive me. Forgive
No,
my
this
pronunciation.
is very bad. This is very bad. You have to bring him down. You have to bring him down for a few weeks.
So you, Kimo, you're
Yes.
talking of Alimosho, Ajeromi,
Yes.
Kosofe,
Yes.
Mushin,
All right, yes.
Oshodi Solo,
Oh my God.
and Ojo.
Did you write
You see
this?
that they are different from what you are saying.
Did you write this? Exactly what? No, did you write this? Yeah, exactly what Muyiwa is saying.
No, I was reading what Muyiwa wrote. That's
fantastic.
But you know what you were calling is different from what he was referring to. So I
okay, good. Thanks for your help.
Those ones are in Florida, Cayuse.
So Muyiwa says together the whole population of about 15 million people. Planting evangelists of ADC here is most critical. So, Funso.
Well, I mean, so it's a good question. You know, yes, those are, you know, communities where there's significant population. Alimosho, Ajeromi, all of those places, yes. But you know, the answer I will give is no different from the answer that I gave earlier. That at the end of the day, all of these locations for all of their population only produce 700,000 votes for APC. That's it. At the end of the day, all said and done. So, you know, a strategy that gets us to produce 1 million votes for Funso Doherty in 2023, okay, adjusted for new registrants. So maybe the maybe the registrants and maybe the kind of the zeal of registration will increase the numbers materially in 2023, which I think they will. But those numbers will be disproportionately in favor, as I'm sure most people will agree, disproportionately in favor of non-incumbents, right? Because what is driving that activity is enchantment, right? So, so we're going to be in communities. We're going to have strategies in those communities. We're going to be out there with our structures, party structures, and the local governments as well, doing the same things. We'll do that geographically. We'll do that community-wise. The various one of the things. Let me just say this. One of the things, for example, that has delivered consistently a block of votes for the APC, or two groups that traditionally have been viewed as delivering a block of votes for the APC, have to do with the road transport unions and the market women's associations. And I think the important thing to realize is that these are two communities, but they've just kind of like focused on those communities and made them captive communities. But there are other communities in the community. There are other communities, right? And so we also, you know, have to and will and are addressing, you know, other communities in the same way that they have addressed the communities that have become captive communities to them. Not that we'll ignore those communities, but we will be measured in the resources that we deploy and employ strategies that target our resources at areas, communities, and segments where they are most likely to be productive, even within this community. So you'll find that in these communities that we talk about, whether it's Ajeromi, Alimosho, etc., there are certain communities that span, just as the road transport unions span across these communities, there are other communities that also span across these communities.
Oh, that's a trying to.
Yeah, and we also will be deploying our own strategies for those geographic and non-geographic communities, professional communities, whatever they are.
Nice.
So,
thank you very much, Funso, for your remarks. So at this time, I would have saved the best for the last. So I'll be calling on Kayode Awokoya, who incidentally was also a coursemate of our guest today. They were in the same accounting class when they were both at the University of Lagos. So Kayode Awokoya knows Funso Doherty very well, and Funso Doherty knows Kayode Awokoya very well. So Kayode, are you on the call?
I am, I'm here.
Fantastic. So the mic is yours.
Okay, so that the questions won't be too familiar as we had. He probably has said a lot of things from the previous speakers, though the questions are meant to ask are wealth creation and education, and he referred a lot to them. But first, let me congratulate you for entering such a ring. Let me tell you guys that Funso is the last person you could imagine to enter such a ring, even not to go near it. But it shows the extent of which really things are bad, and wherein really there's motivation that we can't allow it to be like this. Again, guys like Funso, ordinarily on their own, no matter how competitive or funny the economy is, they're able to compete and compete successfully. So going into politics really is a really call for personal service and sacrifice. So I'd like to congratulate you for that patriotism. I'll just ask two questions. I had quite a number, which I haven't posted on our own WhatsApp. But first, I will start with wealth creation, which I know is your first area. That what kind of GDP do you want to grow Lagos to? Right now, Lagos is underperforming because, there are a lot of drain pipes. But what's your dream GDP, target for Lagos? They say Lagos is the fifth largest economy in Africa. I personally believe that if Lagos works well, it can actually be having a national budget, a budget that is bigger than a national budget. Because 5 trillion, 6 trillion that the federal government is talking about should be too small even for Lagos. But what kind of GDP are you targeting? And how do you want to ensure that there's inclusiveness in that GDP growth? We all agree that Lagos, plenty of money they here, but the money is only in a few places. And because of that, that's what's causing tensions. So that's the first question on the wealth creation, the GDP and how you make it inclusive. The other question on education, reading through your manifesto as well, you said you drive quality in basic education and expand vocational options. So I want to also ask, what are the specific targets that, when you get to the office, you want to be remembered for? Some might be, look, I want to have the highest number of WAEC enrollment. Some can be, I want to have the highest number of 18-year-olds and less who can read and write. What kind of targets would you like to achieve, within your time in office, so that we can benchmark you against them, and let's see whether even such aspirations are compatible with a state like Lagos. So those are the two questions that I will ask at this time. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you,
What
Kay.
Kimodi also tell you that we're also with the schoolmates, even with Funso. So for more than 38 years, so it's a partial thing.
Oh, really?
All right, go ahead with this.
Wow. Okay. Good. All right. Thanks, Kayus, for that. So GDP, I mean, you know, I think your comments are very valid. You know, depending on who you talk to and how you measure it, you know, people will tell you that Lagos GDP, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's like 20% of national GDP or what have you. Maybe it's 20, maybe it's 30. But I think in terms of a target for Lagos, really, one should be looking at kind of growth rates. And for me, it's really about achieving a real rate of growth in the Lagos economy. And by real, I mean inflation adjusted growth that also accounts for population growth, right? Because, you know, there's no point growing if at X, if your population is growing at X plus or 2X, right? Because then your people are becoming impoverished. So I think as a first step, you know, we should be aiming to get Lagos to a place where on an inflation and population adjusted basis, we have a positive real rate of growth, right? At least 100 basis points would be great. And then we build from there, right? You know, in terms of inflation and population adjusted real growth. So that's kind of point number one.
Also, how you make it inclusive? How you want to make it inclusive?
Yes. So the inclusiveness of it really has to do with it really has to do with how do you ensure that resources, you know, are cascaded down the pyramid, right? And that you don't have this inequality that continues to compound. And I think that, you know, a lot of it will stem, you know, there's a policy, I don't know, I call it policy cascade, but it starts from, first of all, not allowing resources to be diverted into private pocket, public resources to be diverted into private pockets, right? Because I think we should not trivialize the amount of public resources that are being diverted into private pockets, as opposed to being spent on things that sort of benefit the Commonwealth and thereby, you know, spread the wealth across the population. So, for example, if people are struggling to take their kids, they can't send their children to public schools because they don't trust the public schools. And so they are taking their hard-earned money to send them to private schools when they can't really actually afford those private schools. That's a problem right there, right? It's the same thing with healthcare. But if you sort of funneled some of those resources, if you curbed out the wastages, funneled those resources into those, you know, health and education quality, and people can send their children to private schools, it's like putting money in their pockets, right? I think the whole question of jobs is another thing. So if we can essentially support small and medium scale businesses, whether it's through regulatory, tax policy, etc., that allows those businesses, which is a means of diverting resources into that segment, that then allows those folks to be able to employ more people. Then you have people who are not working, who are brought into the employment pool. You're spreading resources, you're addressing inequality, right? To the extent possible, if we can make the tax system less regressive, in a sense, where people in the lower category are in effect, in relative terms, are paying more, particularly the people far down in the socioeconomic ladder, right? I don't think the impact on government's revenue would be tremendous, right? But the impact on those people, you know, will probably be significant. These are some of the things that, kind of the transfer mechanisms that you can have. There may be government, there may be certain things which government can do. And one of the things that I've said is that we will explore safety net programs, right? That we can employ, that we can deploy within the state, right? And this is not to say that we should just take all government resources and just be spreading it all over the whole place. But a state like Lagos should be able to have some kind of safety net programs, right, for the most vulnerable, right? And that's another means of distribution, right, that creates this inclusivity that we're talking about. And some of these can be short-term things that enable people to get on their feet and so on and so forth. And then, other things that sort of things like, incentives, for example, to businesses to support their employment activity, or incentives that are tied to employment. So these are some of the redistributive mechanisms. I mean, fundamentally, we understand that, private sector drives growth. It's a capitalist system and all of that, fundamentally. But there are, it's not unbridled. You have to have. It's no point saying our GDP growth is like, X%. That is not very meaningful, to people in terms of what their quality of life is. And so it's important that, and I guess this is the essence of your question, that there's inclusivity around that growth. So I hope these are some of the, I hope this touches on some of those things. Yeah. Then with respect to education, so this quality of education, I mean, there are a number of things. One of the things I talked about was the curriculum itself. The other has to do with the quality of, because you can't give what you do not have. So you can't teach what you do not have. And so the quality of our personnel in our state schools is something that we need to look at very carefully. I think we have a lot of good people in there. But I also know for a fact that we have a lot of people in there that ought not to be there teaching our children. And we must have the resolve to make changes where they are needed, to train those that are trainable.
We are supposed to do.
Sorry, guys, sorry. Who is the last speaker? Who just spoke?
To train those that are trainable.
Sorry. Who just spoke? Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, Kimo. Are you on? Is it this call or another one?
No, this call now, yeah. Sorry, was that you talking?
No, I didn't talk. Funso is online answering my question on education.
No, someone just, someone.
Maybe it was you. I was talking to somebody, sorry.
Okay, good. Yeah. That's what I had. Good. Yeah, Funso, please, yeah. Go ahead.
So quality of teachers, I think, is important. We talked about the curriculum, and then we should have ways and measures of measuring not just the formal exams, but at various points we should have ways of measuring scholastic ability, right? And these are things that are measured in public school systems across the world, and you can actually benchmark yourself against other school systems in other countries, right, at various stages in your educational process. And the checkpoints at which you do those tests. And we should do that in our public school so that we know the quality of what we're producing. So that if we're far below what we should, let's know. And so that we can work on fixing it. I also talked about vocational options. It's important to improve the range of vocational options for a number of reasons. One is that not everybody is gifted in the same way, and some people are more suited to some of those options. Two, those are options that lend themselves to entrepreneurial activity, to establishing again of small businesses, which we see in other markets. Those people can go on to establish businesses and then become employers of others, etc. So these are all elements of things that we need to bring, in my view, into the educational space, such that people who come out of the state school systems, we know will have a minimum standard of education. I went to a public school, government-owned school. It was a federal school, but still it was a government-owned school. And I'm sure a number of us on this call also went to government schools. And from there, we went on to, some of the best schools in other countries, and we did well, and we competed. In those days, you would come out of a government primary school, and the quality of your spoken English, I tell people the quality of my spoken English, I don't think has changed dramatically from when I came out of primary school, right? I may know more words and all of that, but the quality of my spoken English, I don't think has changed so materially. And the same was the case in government schools. Because somebody comes out of primary school, he can speak English. Is that the case today? I'm not so sure. So.
Nice. Thank you very much, Funso Doherty. And before touching briefly on what comes next, I'd like to offer a few personal observations. I'd be quick to say that, Funso, your responses have been quick and decisive. And I would like to thank you very much for your time. I know you're a very busy man. I mean, to be governor of Lagos State is not easy. And for you to give us to this time today is something that we dearly appreciate. And I would say that I really want to appreciate you for having the right priorities. Your decision to run is compatible with life's work. I appreciate the order and sequence of the way your mind works. And I would like our audience to consider donating to this campaign. We have to understand the importance of money in elections in Nigeria. Now, we are not looking at elections from the way the other people or the other parties look at elections. If you not, can you mute your phones, please? Yeah. I mean, this is bold. This is huge. This is bold. This is huge. So I think that this campaign needs all the resources it can garner, it can get. So I would like all of us to support Funso. Funso is a man that we all know, a man of proven integrity, and nothing is going to be too big or too small. Let's support his campaign. Let's support his vision. We have heard him, and I think he has his heart in the right place. Funso, thank you so much for everything. And for those who want to have more information on how to support this campaign, please kindly go to his website, and you will see everything that you need to give the support that you want to give. Yeah, so with that, I would like Funso to give us a closing remark for a few minutes. Funso.
Thank you, Kimo. And I want to thank everybody who's been on this call and who has invested the time to spend this time hearing our message and asking questions, being engaged. It's been very interactive, and I appreciate the opportunity and the engagement. I just want to say that, as we all know, the battle that lies ahead of us is not a trivial one. There's a hegemony in place. It's a very They will hold on tenaciously. But we also know that with the will of the people, if the will of the people is expressed on election day, what looks like a tenacious grip will be proven to be a very tenuous grip indeed. At the end of the day, the message that we're carrying is a message that will be carried on the backs of people like you and me and people who support what we're setting out to do. People have asked that, people have talked about the courage of stepping forward. And I say, well, it's a collective battle. Somebody has to step forward. But at the end of the day, as the person who steps forward, you just hope that when you step forward and you look behind you, that you are not standing alone, right? That there are some people also standing there with you. But that has been our experience. People have been receptive to the message. But I think it's also important for each of us to know that at the end of the day, the collective action will be a combination of the action of each and every one of us. And ultimately, our prevailing in the polls will be a function of folks who identify with the message, taking that next step of being active supporters, and ultimately a sufficient number of people getting off their backsides on that day and insisting that they will vote and that their votes will be counted and that they will be instrumental in ushering in the change that they want to see. So with that, I'll just say thank you. Appreciate you all, and have a good evening or afternoon, depending on where in the world you are.
Yeah, thank you, Funso, for your closing remarks. And I would like to thank all of you for your time. I would like to especially thank our panelists for their time. I would like to thank all of you. I mean, it's been a very substantive, it's been a very educative, very informative session. I hope we can have more of this, where people who want to preside over our future can offer themselves to questions, can offer themselves to service. Funso, you have set a very good example. I wish you good luck, and the sky is your limit. You go very far. Thank you very much, and we will do everything. I personally will do everything to support your campaign. I have heard you, and I am very convinced. I like your determination. I like your courage, and all I can say is good luck for the future. Thank you so much. And with that, we bring this session to a close. Thanks, guys, and have a lovely week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Well done, both.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Kimo, the fisherman.
Funso, well done, no? Kusha. Kimo, well done. So.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
Matthew, well done.
Thank you, guys. This was really, really nice. Thank you so much.